Hello, I'm Robin Nelson, and I would like to welcome you to the Camp Biocultural webinar sponsored by the National Science Foundation and supported by the Human Biology Association and the American Association of Biological Anthropology. The Camp Biocultural webinar is part of the Camp International launch. The Cultural Anthropomethods Program, or CAMP International, is a community of practice with a listserv, teaching program, scholarly research, website, and an online methods curriculum. The Camp International program kicks off with online lectures in English, subtitled in various languages and spanning 15 methods modules. These 50 lectures offer the best methodological guidance from our nationally selected faculty who come from the US and all over the world. The faculty includes senior scholars who created the field or method they discuss, and early career scholars who are blazing exciting pathways forward. In each lecture, these anthropological methodologists provide cutting-edge advice on a range of mixed methods used in anthropology and allied fields. Our curriculum covers essentials like research design, sample selection, data management, and ethical research. We are honored to offer Indigenous methods, Black feminist methods, and participatory methods from scholars who are leading our field in new important directions. Our curriculum includes popular, qualitative, and linguistic methods, including theme analysis, systematic coding, discourse analysis, and conversation analysis. We offer an orientation to several fields of quantitative analysis, like social network analysis and cultural consensus analysis. We have specialized modules such as gender analysis, medical and biocultural methods, and cross-cultural methods. These lectures can be used for learning or teaching, so we include a module on how to teach methods the camp way. In addition to our online lectures, we offer resources on our website, including information on best practices for methods, teaching, and step-by-step instructions for providing methods feedback to students. We view the Camp International launch as a first step towards building the global methods community we envision. We hope that scholars from around the world will join the listserv, contribute additional methods, lectures, and get involved with camp. Today, we're here to discuss what we've accomplished so far and the unique ways that biocultural anthropology can benefit from and contribute to camp. I'd like to introduce our host, Dr. Alexandra Burris.
Thanks, Robin. I am incredibly happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation to moderate this webinar. My name is Alex Brewis, and I'm very proud to say that I am a biocultural anthropologist. I think a name that a lot of people come to rather than start with, so it's kind of the endpoint of an interesting journey, how you come to consider yourself a biocultural anthropologist. So I'm super excited about what our panelists have to say today. So I have been thinking of myself as a biocultural anthropologist for about 30 years now. I'm a professor at Arizona State University, where I teach in the anthropology and global health programs and do research on issues such as water insecurity and health and well-being, things that are inherently at the intersection of culture and biology. So now I invite our expert guests to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes each. If you could tell us a little bit about who you are, your institution, your career stage, and the exciting research that brings you in and makes you a biocultural anthropologist. And especially if you could highlight some of the methods that you deploy in executing that vision that you have. So I suggest we go around alphabetically to keep us organized. So that means we would start with Dr. Barbara Piperata.
Thank you, Alex and Robin, and I'm excited to be here. So I'm Dr. Barbara Piperata. I am a professor in anthropology department at The Ohio State University. And I definitely also consider myself, and long have, a biocultural anthropologist. I think I started more as a biological anthropologist, and but the nature of my work really pushed me to have to learn a lot of additional methods to complement the work that I had planned to do and to get the data that I needed in order to answer my research questions. Most of my research, well, I'd say in most generally, my research is interested in how cultural norms and practices intersect with the household ecology to shape the environments in which maternal and child health are created, and because those are the spaces in which they spend much of their time and grow and develop and interact. I have a pretty exciting project right now that is funded by the National Science Foundation that's entitled Ecoculturing the Infant Gut Microbiome. And this truly embraces a biocultural approach. So in this project, we're trying to understand how cultural norms and practices regarding the rearing of infants from birth to 2 years intersect with the household ecology. So we're looking at homes that are wealthy homes compared to impoverished homes in the Amazonian city of Belém, that sits right at the mouth of the Amazon. And we're tracking these babies and moms over a 2-year period, collecting data on babies' gut microbiome formation, but also mom's breast milk, baby's oral microbiome over time. But because we're interested in the intersection of cultural norms, the household ecology, and these bio outcomes, we need data on all of those. So I'm using methods that range from detailed, in-depth interviews with moms, pile sorting to understand feeding practices, focus groups, tons of participant observation. And then that's getting combined with surveys. So we've got huge 33-page survey to gather data on the household economy, the household ecology, the neighborhood, and all of those types of classic economic and social variables. And then, of course, we've got all the biological samples, fecal samples, saliva samples, breast milk samples, anthropometric measurements of babies, dietary data, and all of that's getting combined to create this niche that these babies are growing up in, and then trying to relate that to that variability in the gut and the oral microbiome. So it is a great example, I think, of a biocultural study.
Thanks, Barbara. Let's switch to Carla.
Hello, my name is Kayla. I am a third-year PhD student in biological anthropology, though as many others have stated, I consider myself very much a biocultural anthropologist, and I'm at Northwestern University. Broadly, I am interested in intergenerational stress transmission and its impacts on pregnancy and birth outcomes, and specifically how experiences of social, political, historical, economic inequality impact those processes. Being a third year, I'm thinking a lot right now about what my dissertation work is going to look like. So everything is very sort of tentative, but my dissertation currently is very much interested in the historical legacies of colonialism in Cameroon, and particularly how they shape axes of power and identity across sociolinguistic lines between Anglophone and Francophone Cameroonians. And so I'm sort of asking questions about if there are differences in birth outcomes between these populations, but I'm also very interested from a more qualitative perspective, how this axis of power shapes maternal experiences in the hospital as like a setting where power erupts in the context of care. And so, yes. And I guess in terms of methods, as I said, I'm still thinking about this, but there will be participant observation in the hospital context. And because my project is very interested in this linguistic divide, the sociolinguistic divide, I'm considering incorporating some linguistic methods or methods from linguistic anthropology and combining those with more traditional bioanthropology methods, looking at stress, cortisol, birth outcomes like preterm birth and low birth weight. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Carly now.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Carly Cheney. I'm an NSF SB postdoctoral fellow at WashU in St. Louis, being mentored by Drs. Liz Millant and Teresa Gildner. I'm also a preparing future faculty for inclusive excellence postdoc at the University of Missouri, Columbia. And again, echoing everyone so far, I probably originally considered myself a biological anthropologist, and as time goes on, I certainly have grown more and more into the biocultural side of things. And my work uses a developmental origins of health and disease framework to investigate the underlying mechanisms that connect disparities in environmental conditions to human health over the lifetime. So within that, I look at how aspects of the social and physical environment influence the toxicity of environmental contaminants. And I also look at the embedding of structural disparities, again, across the life course. And to do this, I use a lot of different quantitative methods that involve collecting biological samples and analyzing them for hormones and inflammatory biomarkers, using ELISAs, looking at the gut microbiome, using 16S and 18S rRNA sequencing, targeted and untargeted metabolomics to get at contaminants. But then I also use a lot of qualitative methods to dig into this as well, how the social and structural environments are really affecting people's lives. So I've used ethnography, semi-structured interviews. I'm working on a document analysis project right now, and we're in the midst of a photo voice project, which has been really, really fun.
Thank you so much. All right, Keegan.
All right. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. My name is Keegan Kraus, and I'm a PhD candidate in biological and medical anthropology at Northwestern University, where I work in Professor Thomas McDade's Laboratory for Human Biology Research, and more recently as an instructor of biological anthropology. A little bit different from everyone else here. I actually started off thinking myself as a cultural medical anthropology, and then upon engaging with coming into Northwestern, I very quickly adapted the identity of a biocultural anthropologist. And so my dissertation research takes a biocultural approach to understand how experiences of belonging, exclusion, and displacement influence inflammatory regulation patterns and cardiometabolic disease risk among Haitian and Dominican tourism workers in the Dominican Republic. And regarding methods, it just so happens I just returned from an initial summer fieldwork trip filled with a lot of participant observation, institutional ethnography, semi-structured qualitative interviews among tourism workers on the North Coast. And so that's mostly what I focus on. And as I move forward in my dissertation, my plan is to synthesize this initial ethnographic data from participant observation and coded qualitative interviews, along with the input of my local collaborators to validate a local measure of belonging in context of displacement, immigration, and tourism. And because I also take a biocultural approach to understand how social experiences influence health, I'm also adapting an exciting new minimally invasive cell culture protocol that uses finger-stick blood samples to measure cellular inflammatory regulation. So ultimately, these biomarkers will be used in combination with our cross-sectional survey among a sample of those who labor in a few key tourism sectors across the country. And again, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really always so exciting for people like me to see that the next generation of biocultural anthropologists is really pushing the envelope very hard to do things that, or frankly, we never even imagined earlier in our careers. So that's just such a privilege to have soon-to-be doctors here with us who are the next era of our field. So I'm really interested now to ask people about how they got their research training, because one of the challenges of biocultural anthropology is you're working across multiple types of data that requires quite sophisticated training in lab and field culture and biology. So I'm kind of interested how you guys either put that together or are putting that together. So again, let's start with Barbara.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this. I looked at these questions in advance and I was like, how did this happen? Since it's a while, it's happened over a long period of time now. I think that coming from, I hate to call it old school, but, having gotten my training a bit ago now, we didn't have a lot of methods courses. And so you really had to learn on your own a lot of methodology. So I started out, like I said, identifying much more as like, bioanthropologist, human biologist, although most of them include culture in their work. But I started as a human biologist. So I learned all those methods in my advisor's lab. So we got to practice them. We had hands-on training in a lot of things like anthropometrics. She had a really great setup for measuring oxygen consumption to measure, caloric expenditure. So I learned how to do a lot of those methods in the lab with great, solid training. But when it came to, even putting a survey together, like knowing how to design a survey or an interview that flowed well and that was not repetitive, but repetitive enough, that you're like hitting the same topic in a few different ways so that you're really getting, you're making sure that they're understanding you and you're understanding them, and validating those sorts of tools in the field. A lot of that didn't come until I was actually embedded in the field doing my dissertation work. which I spent 2 years in the Amazon doing that work. So I had some times to fail and fix it because I wasn't like in and out, you know. And I think that was a privilege of long-term field work, is it allowed me to test out some things and then correct them. So some of it was, you know, feet in the, you know, just thrown into the pit, the fire, and learning. And then coming back, we didn't have in my program really cultural methods courses. So that's why I'm pretty excited about this online toolkit that's being put together, because I wish that I would have had exposure to some of those things then. I probably would have incorporated even additional methods into my fieldwork had I even known they existed, but I didn't have those courses to learn that. So trial and error, and then some really good solid laboratory training is probably how I've got to where I am.
Thanks. Let's jump to the future Dr. Connors.
Yeah, so I'm currently in the thick of this process, and I think part of where I am right now is writing up my proposal for this year and sort of really sitting down and digging into what will these methods look like. So a lot of my training started, I think, similar to anybody who's been in our program. We have a bioanthropology, sort of your standard biomethods training course. But then as a part of my first year, I, thanks to Keegan, was encouraged to apply to the camp program as a fellow. And I knew from the beginning that I was very interested in incorporating both bio and cultural methods. And so I was really excited about the possibility to do that. And so after applying and being accepted as a fellow into the program, the program really helped me start thinking a lot about how to integrate these two sort of ways that I was thinking about my questions. And importantly, I think it helped me start thinking critically about different methods that could incorporate cultural, critical perspectives, which I was really interested in thinking critically about the role of power in a lot of the contexts that I was looking at. At that time, I was thinking about birth outcomes in the US. And then, but also connecting that like back to some public health and biomethods that I was thinking about at the time. I recently spent 6 weeks in Cameroon as a sort of preliminary field experience, and that gave me some time to test out some of my ethnographic methods and see sort of what's working and then what I might need to readjust for my next visit. And so I think this year I'm really leaning into also reading more of the studies that excite me, talking to a lot of my colleagues. Keegan has been a great resource, Robin and a lot of my colleagues here at Northwestern, and sort of pushing me to think about how I can bring the questions that I'm interested in and attack them from different angles. And so that's kind of where I am right now. Hopefully by the end of this year, I will have a very clear picture of what things look like. So thank you.
Thank you. Carly.
Yeah, so my grad program had really great, strong formal training in traditional biological anthropology methods, lab work. The sociocultural side of the department had some great training for ethnographic methods. But as I developed my dissertation, I found that there were specific things I needed to go elsewhere to get. So spent some time in environmental health, getting some of the contaminants related training I needed, and then realizing that I really wanted to incorporate some more systematic qualitative methods into my work. Started looking for resources for that, and that's actually how I stumbled upon camp to get that training. And so I think sometimes programs, anthropology departments are really small. They can't always offer training in every single method or for every single interest. And so sometimes that involves reaching out to other places. And thankfully, resources like camp exist to address that.
Thank you. You mentioned your graduate program was particularly well suited to this sort of training. Do you want to give them a shout out?
Yes, I was at Yale. Working with Claudia Valegia and also Rick Berbieskas and Nikki Hawley.
Thanks. All right, Keegan.
Yeah, I suppose my interest in orientation towards the methods I'm using now started I guess 12 years ago. I started my PhD program a little bit later than maybe most folks. But it started at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. I studied anthropology. I was fortunate to get some pretty solid mixed undergrad, grad methods training there. And I actually was taken under the wing of a fantastic PhD candidate in educational psychology who taught me how to thematically code um, her dissertation interviews. And so that was key for me. And after that, I realized that I needed more experience with methods. And my wife and I quickly enrolled in an ethnographic field school in the Lake Atitlan region of Guatemala. It was through North Carolina State University, directed by Tim Wallace. And after that, a summer field work, it was pretty comprehensive. We learned about pile sorts. It was quick. We realized we needed more language skills. We needed more very specific and rigorous methods training. And so to do that, part of that, we joined the Peace Corps to get some language skills. Part of that experience was, just kind of getting tossed into it, and a lot, some also good training in engaging in community level collaboration. And I think that's what we took from that. And that lined me up for graduate work. And so I ended up doing a master's in public health and a master's in Latin American studies at the University of Arizona. So I was exposed to epidemiology. I ended up doing some formal ethnographic work for my thesis, and then that culminated into getting into the program at Northwestern, where it was actually the pandemic. Right when I came in was right during the pandemic, so I just threw myself into wet lab work. And having those experiences before, and then really, it takes, as you previously mentioned, it takes a lot of time and work to engage in these different skills. So I was mostly just in the lab, and that's when I came across the camp program, and that's really what solidified everything for me. That allowed me to synthesize these qualitative methods, rigorous qualitative methods, with the into a biocultural approach.
Thank you. So several of you mentioned it, particularly the earlier career scholars mentioned that camp had been central to your training. So I wanted to ask a very pointed question about what drew you into camp and how it's continuing to influence what you're doing now. So let's start with Barbara, if she could tell us a bit about how she came to be part of this community of practice.
So my being here today can mostly be blamed on Alex. So I've known Alex for a long time, and she's been quite a force and a leader in the Human Biology Association. Our work overlaps quite a bit, our interests overlap quite a bit. And so the opportunity arose, and I was invited to participate, and we're very intellectually aligned. So I felt like, and I'm very committed to this. I mean, one of the things that I love about being a biocultural anthropologist, and I know we don't have to be in anthropology departments, but we tend to be in anthropology departments. And so I get very excited about, showing students that, it doesn't have to be one or the other, that it's actually the holistic combination that anthro kind of corners the market on. That allows us to do some very innovative work and to ask questions that really cross boundaries. And so, as soon as I was asked to do it, I was totally on board, because anything I can contribute to spread the word of that, or to provide those skills to the next generation, is exciting for me. I mean, I wish I had some of these things, and I'm happy to participate in activities that provide this kind of skill set to those who are interested, and I think about, for the next group coming through, that this is going to be a great resource. I'm getting excited now about the opportunity to maybe just teach the methods class here, because these tools are available, and and everybody likes online materials. So it would actually help me do a better job at it. So yeah, I mean, I came here because of Alex, and I'm staying because I'm very committed to the project.
Thanks, Barbara. All right, Kayla.
Yes. So as I previously mentioned, I think Camp First became on my radar when I was looking to apply to graduate programs, and like had a conversation with Keegan, and he told me, like, keep it on your radar for when you are in your first year. And so when I was admitted and started, Keegan was already offering me like really, really helpful insights just in terms of how to think about my questions. And so then when he again kind of reminded me about the program, and then Robin also came to visit Northwestern, and I had a small conversation with her about the program. I became really excited and realized it could be really useful for me. And so that's when I decided to apply and potentially to be a fellow. I think it was the summer of 2023. Um, and one of the most beneficial aspects of camp for me has been the network. And so the network is kind of what brought me into camp. And as I think about my questions, and I even remember my summer after camp doing individual interviews with the folks who came and lectured and sort of getting specific feedback about how I could think about my question, my research design, what sorts of methods I might consider, what sorts of methods might not be useful for me. And I think that's been the biggest and will continue to be, especially this year, the biggest benefit and sort of the meaning and value that camp has had in my life, and all of the cool connections and support that comes with that network as well.
Thank you. Carly.
Yeah, so I think I also already talked a little bit about how I came to camp. But I think what I might add is that I applied to camp hoping to get training in like one or two very specific methods, and then was trained in a whole array of them. And so while I didn't use all of them immediately, it has been already really useful in my career. For the project I'm working on right now, we're looking at structural inequities and flooding and how that's affecting people's biology and microbiomes. And as we were talking to people, they just kept showing us photos of the flooding. And when people started doing that, I was like, oh, I know a method where we can really formalize this and, analyze systematically people's experiences with the flooding through their photos and their conversations about them. And so I think that has been one of the things that I've really enjoyed about camp is, even if you join and just use one method immediately, it's a whole resource that you can keep going back to throughout your career.
Thank you. Keegan.
Yeah, well, I was somewhat aware of the camp. As I mentioned before, I did my master's work at the University of Arizona, so ASU is not too far away, bear down. So so I was a little bit aware of it. And then, of course, a colleague of mine, Jerfa Gerlin, came in, who I came into the program with, did it in 2021. And then another colleague of mine from the University of Arizona, Sarah Rinkert, did it that same year. And so they had really fantastic things to say about it. And it was also somewhat like it was kind of as the pandemic was coming down, and it fit perfectly. I wasn't able to go to the field and I needed some training methods, and I reached out to Amber, and she provided some more information about it, and I ended up applying, and it was such a fantastic experience. Really, it was great timing for me in my program, right as I was hitting the point where I needed to be writing my NSF proposals internally in my program, hitting milestones, defending my proposals. It really gave me a lot of confidence. And as Kayla mentioned, just such a great network of folks to bounce ideas off of and to learn from. Yeah, so that's how I got involved.
Thank you. So, Keegan, you mentioned coming in during the pandemic to the training camp that's held in the summers, and one of the really interesting things about that is that particular camp had run as an in-person experience for decades in training students, and had to very quickly switch its modality to online. And it might be too soon for us to talk about the good things that came out of the pandemic, but one of the things that happened with camp was this sort of rethinking of how methods training can happen in this sort of supportive environment online. And one of the outcomes of that is what we're sort of here to launch today, which is the open access materials that have developed over the last 3 years to bring us into an online modality so that more people in more places can benefit from the learning that goes on in camp. So I wondered if each of you could talk a little bit about how you think some of the ways that materials that are now open access, the lectures, the exercises, and so on, might be of use to people who are thinking about doing biocultural anthropology or struggling to find training in biocultural anthropology. Barbara.
Well, I mean, you know, this morning I actually went back on to look at the array of some of the videos. You know, I remember being there to record mine, but I wanted to see sort of what the other ones were. And I was really impressed with the scope. You know, I mean, it's pretty broad. And as I mentioned earlier, I guess there's like a few things that are really important about this. So I mentioned earlier the fact, and I think a lot of people here kind of have that experience or can appreciate it, is that anthro departments often cannot offer all of these different methodologies. Some are stronger in cultural, some are stronger in bio. They might offer a lab in one or the other, but you're not going to get both. I mean, you're really lucky if you're able to get both of those. It sounds like Carly was able to get both of those, but that's not common, and that's certainly not the norm. So I think for those who even have an advisor like me, who is a biocultural anthropologist and wants to train them to do that, I can't even in my own department have the coursework to prepare them. So this is an enormous tool for that, where you could say, okay, here's what we're going to do here together in the lab, and then you're going to complement that with some of the skills that you can get and the exposures you can get through camp. So I think it's great for that. I think it could be used incredibly for course planning. I mean, it's now making me think that I want to teach like a cross-cultural, or I'm sorry, cross methods kind of methods course for our department, because now I have other tools that I can lean on and quickly like figure out what I need to teach them, send them to this resource. All the videos we were asked to make, I know when I made mine, it includes the other resources. So you kind of get a snippet, you get a taste of what the method is, but then the resources to dig in further are provided. So then you can go down that. So I think, you know, that's great. And then I serve on the PhD committees of Brazilian students. And they don't get this training at all. There is no biocultural anthropology in Brazil. So they're exposed to it through me, but they can't get any training at home. And so this is going to be an incredible toolkit for them. So I'm very excited about the international component.
Thank you. Kayla.
So I still go back and look at all of the camp materials now. As I'm working on my proposal, I'm often going back and looking at a lot of the readings that we did as a part of our camp season, but also the videos that we had and some of the newer and more updated videos. So I'm constantly thinking about, okay, I know I want to do this. I know I'm interested in this. I remember this person did this video. Let me go look it up on the website and sort of refresh myself on those ideas. And I think a lot of those things are influencing the way that my proposal is coming together. I think also really important for me in my experience with camp was sort of remembering some of the pasts of our discipline, some of the harms that our discipline has contributed to in terms of racism, sexism, and sort of the way that that has been baked into the way that we've approached our questions historically. And I think for me, really exciting has been the exposure to community-based methods. And again, being able to go back and reference that as I'm thinking about what my project looks like. The exposure to Black feminist methods, which I'm now also trying to expand to sort of what does African and African diasporic feminisms look like in terms of a methodology. And then also, I think being able to think critically and not just like critique something, but also structure your question and research design with that critical thought as baked into it. And so being a bit more systematic in that criticism, I think, has been really helpful in terms of like thinking through, okay, where am I looking at power in the context of my project? And how am I going to measure that? And whose voices am I going to elevate or center in that? And what methods are going to allow for me to do that in a way that makes sense for the community and the context and the history that I'm working in? And so I think also with that, having access, again, as folks have mentioned, to multiple methods and being able to think through the questions from multiple angles, I think for me is really helpful as I continue to develop what my project's going to look like and sort of parse apart everything. And I know I kind of want to do everything, and I know that's not possible. So I'm also in this stage of like paring some things down and being like, okay, we'll save that for a later point in the future. But I love that I can go back and I can review whatever I need to review. And I know who made the video. I know who I can reach out to as a part of the community if I have specific questions.
Thank you. Carly.
Wow. Both Barbara and Kayla had such amazing responses. I don't know that I have a lot to add. I think that research-wise, having these materials open access really does allow you to go back when there is something that you want to dig into more or maybe use for the first time. And so I think that's great. And then as I think about my future career, as I hope to continue on in academia, training students. And if a student has a question where like discourse analysis would be really useful, something I've never done, CAMP provides resources to help train that student.
Thank you. Keegan.
Yeah, I mean, Camp, this open access materials is such an excellent, notable contribution to open access pedagogy that I think is useful across disciplines. Specifically, I think about it in these three ways: access, time, and resources, which are all ultimately, I think, for academics or and their collaborators are tied to funding. And you need funding and time to get access to resources, and you need resources and funding to create time to get that access. And the access to these resources, access to this training is so differential, like across programs and across disciplines and across countries. And I think having these materials, in particularly in a variety of languages, subtitled in a variety of languages, open access, helps level the playing field and provides folks with it helps break down barriers to access these resources. And I think part of that is really also what Barbara, what you previously mentioned also is it just takes so much time in the lab. Like it's sometimes especially as a PhD student, you only have so much time and so many resources to dedicate to becoming an expert in one methodology or a few methodologies. And this allows for folks who may not have those resources at their institution, or may not have advisors who have direct connections to folks who can provide that, a very easy way to consume these resources and go back and reconsume it, as opposed to just taking like one class that, if you don't get the notes down, you have to go back, you can refer to the textbook and whatnot. But so I really think that is that's where the power lies here, is opening access, opening the pedagogical plane to a variety of folks. And then for me, I was fortunate, me and Kayla were in the field at the same time this summer. And so having the network to like talk, and I could ask Kayla like advice on what you think. And then she was able to even refer me to someone she happened to know in my field site, which is, crazy coincidence. But thinking about training my collaborators or my research assistants, having these materials is so fantastic. It's so important. I think I'm just very excited about these resources moving forward.
Thank you so much. It's going to be very exciting to see in the years ahead how people use this to build networks, develop new transdisciplinary collaborations, extend training across what have been historical boundaries. So I think one of the things that's exciting is just in the last couple of weeks, they've launched the new listserv where people are putting their questions as they're trying to design research and solve problems that seem tricky out to the wider community of people that have come together that have this amazing extended set of methods. And I think for all of us, it's just, especially for biocultural anthropologists, having so many methods laid out in front of you as a wonderful buffet to be able to think about, you know, how and where and with whom we can work to address increasingly complicated problems, which is where the field of anthropology and health research more generally is going. So I have a final question, which is to sort of think forward a little bit, is that CAMP and designing these open access and networks and communities of practice has been, I think, very ambitious in what it's tried to do, but it hasn't done everything yet. And there's still things that I think, especially as biocultural anthropologists, that engage in quite complicated collaborations with people with different training and so on. What else could CAMP be doing moving forward to advance the sort of biocultural anthropology that we want to see being done?
I take it you're coming to me.
Yes, please, Barbara.
Well, I mean, as you were just saying that, so I think one thing that just came to me now might be, are you talking about new videos or, you know, like new training videos and stuff, or?
Whatever you imagine.
Okay, so I can imagine a lot of things here. So one would be if I was thinking about more materials for the site, that would help biocultural anthropologists, that came up by everybody here, is the fact that because of the nature of the fact, you know, the fact that we engage so many different methods, and we tend to do transdisciplinary work. We tend to immediately start thinking that we're going to be doing work that's at the very least interdisciplinary and perhaps transdisciplinary. Perhaps a video on the kind of standard stumbling blocks to really making interdisciplinary work work. Working with folks in other fields is not easy. Working with anyone can be, you know, it can be difficult. It's challenging, but when you don't share a same language, when you don't, you know, when you may have a holistic view of the problem, but the person you're working with is very much an expert in their particular thing, that communication can be really challenging. And so I think videos that would, or some, you know, someone to speak about how to overcome some of those challenges, what some of the skills are that you need to be an effective interdisciplinary scholar would be great. You know, we've got two young colleagues here, three actually, I'll say from my perspective, young colleagues here who are recent PhDs or finishing their PhD, working on their PhDs right now, that are working in laboratory methods. We don't have any of those up there yet, but yet they're a major part of the toolkit for biocultural anthropologists. So, you know, there are point of care machines that we could do a nice video on just even using them. They're readily available. They're very inexpensive. They're field friendly. And we can do a lot with those kinds of things. And then we have, you know, the blood spots, which have been, you know, the technology for that, and the array of analyses and metabolites and the different things we can look at, immunocomponents, stress, you know, all these different things we can look at with blood spots. Doing a video on that, and perhaps one, you know, thinking about ways to help, talking about networking, is helping connect folks that have expertise in these different areas within CAMP to generate collaborative endeavors would be great. I'm working right now with Carly, and I'm very excited about that. That comes through the networks that we are all embedded in. So I think CAMP can really make a difference there. That's been brought up several times by others here, is the networking component. So I think that's another great aspect of CAMP that I hope to see expand as we move ahead.
Thank you, Kayla.
Yes. So I think sort of two things come to mind, which is, I think I would like to see more examples of how people use a particular method in different regional contexts. So I think right now we have folks, for example, who do community-based participatory research. But like one thing I was finding during my field summer is like what that looks like in the context of like my field site is like, well, people don't trust NGOs. So I can't really go the way of working with a nonprofit like maybe I would if I were working here. So I think more examples of how people use these methods in a variety of contexts, regional, social, political, etc. And then I think sort of similar to what Dr. Piperetta was saying, more examples also on how people merge qualitative and quantitative. Like I think there's so many ways one can go about asking their question and bringing together different methods from either side. And there's so many ways to be creative about it. And one of the things I'm constantly sitting down and thinking about and asking myself is like, okay, I want to ask this question. What are the best methods from this angle and this angle to allow for me to do that? And so I think more examples of folks who have found unique, creative, and interesting ways to like bring these things together, especially methods that you don't often think of as like working well with biological anthropology. Having a good example of how someone has done that in the past, for me, I would find really helpful at this stage.
Thank you, Carly.
Yes, I was thinking kind of similarly to Kayla about merging quantitative and qualitative research. And I think it's really tempting to just kind of analyze the quantitative separately, write that up, analyze the qualitative data separately and write that up, and then, cross-site reference the papers when you like publish. But that's not really an effective way of intertwining this work. And there are some great examples out there, but it's still something personally I struggle with, and like how I'm going to analyze this data in a way where they're really in communication with each other. And so if CAMP, had a resource on ways to analyze data, write up data, that kind of merge between these two different styles would be really useful. Yeah.
Thank you, Keegan.
Yeah, well, I first want to say I love the idea of adding biomarker videos in. I think that would be fantastic. And I also love the idea of Kayla and Carly, what you all are talking about is that's such a tricky thing, is synthesizing new ways of collecting qualitative data with biomarker stuff. I think the only thing I might add, I think selfishly, because I'm going through this right now, is that I think camp curriculum could be complemented by additional training in initiating, maintaining, and organizing collaborations with institutions, host institutions, because that's such a key part of biocultural work in maintaining ethical methods, the integrity of your research, and collaborating with local individuals. And that's tricky. And you have to go through, of course, potentially local IRB stuff at the very base level, but also navigating what methods to be incorporated in the research. What are the agreements in publications, even going forward with data sharing, and how is that data best presented back to the community? We certainly talked about that at camp, I know, and there's been great examples of that, but I think that's just one way that I can see something that I was searching for is good examples of how this has been done in the past. What are the best practices for navigating the tricky collaborations that are required for biomarker transportation even? So
Thank you. That's very exciting thoughts from all of you. It's always been, with I'm with Barbara, that a lot of being a biocultural anthropologist, because there really are no good roadmaps for how to put these things together in a research design, is that whenever you try to push hard in that direction, it's always been there's far more failures than successes. So it's like one of the challenges of the field is that you're trying to do much more. But also, I think, ask bigger questions and deeper questions than cultural or biological approaches can ask. So it's exciting for me to see the future of the field. I think it's very, very bright, and that's where it's heading. And so, speaking of which, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Nelson, our moderator.
Well, I just want to begin by thanking everyone so much for being here and for your thoughtful answers to the questions. I I'm quite inspired after listening to this. I was taking notes, copious notes while you all were talking, to bring back to the fellow camp PIs so that we can continue to improve the program. Before we close, I just wanted to ask if everyone, or anyone rather, including Alex, please, if anyone has any thoughts or concluding thoughts or comments. You can unmute yourself. I don't want to call on you because, I don't want to put you on the spot. So, anybody want to go?
Well, the one thought I had, sort of pinging off some of the things people are saying, is how important internet, open access and these widening the community is to our wider field. And, like Barbara, I supervise PhD students in Ethiopia in particular and in Haiti. And having these resources opens new ways to collaborate, to train, and it's pushing our field in ways that it needs to go, that we haven't been able to do without being able to really dig into some of these new technologies that allow these conversations, cross-training and so on. So I think that to me is the most exciting part of this, is how it opens new ways to work with scholars in places where we haven't been able to engage with them as fully as we've wanted to in the past. So I think that's a very exciting move in a good direction.
Barbara, I saw that you unmuted.
No, I was going to say something very similar to that. I've really been this latest project, this Brazilian project now that I have, this is probably the most aggressive, just ambitious project I've ever taken on. And it's been rough. I mean, we started it right during the pandemic. I mean, we got the money and literally a month and a half later, we were in the midst of COVID. And so we had to pivot. We had to do so many different things. But I think what it did is it made me rely so much more on a field team than I ever have for any other research I've ever done. And this collection of videos, so that because of that, then I become very deeply engaged with the students in ways that I wouldn't have before. And so now I mentor them, right? So I'm their co-advisor. And one of the things I learned about them is, they are well-read, they're very enthusiastic, they're very hungry for knowledge, but there's a lot of limitations on what they have access to. And this really can level the playing field. I think someone used that exact phrase, where we can really bring education, take the boundary, remove the barriers to teaching these methods. They were already problematic here, where we have a challenge, teaching this range of methods, but now we're making them readily accessible. So I'm very excited about that aspect of having this online. And I'm just excited to be part of a community of people who want to push boundaries and take risks and do new things and combine stuff that no one combines before and see how it works, because that's how, science grows and that's how you learn about the world. And I'm excited to be part of that. So thanks for including me.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Kayla.
I'll just say, and I said this earlier, but I am really excited to be in the position to use the resources, to put all of this to work and to see how it develops my current project, but also to then, as we talk about the previous question of like, what would we like to see for the future, to then in a few years, hopefully be in a position to take all of the things that I learn from my trial and error and process, and having access to these resources at this stage in my dissertation development, to then be able to be in a position to offer mentorship and insight, and to share with future students what I have learned from engaging with camp and sort of learning through my own processes simultaneously. So I'm very grateful to be at this stage and to have access to this resource. And I know for a fact that the way that my project has developed in the last year and a half has been greatly influenced by a lot of camp resources and will continue to be.
Carly.
Yeah. So this conversation has been so exciting, so energizing. I'm gonna write down a bunch of new ideas after. And I think that is illustrative of, the effect of the camp network and bringing together people who are really thinking about exciting questions. And with these materials now being open access, that gives the chance for that network to grow even wider and for so many more voices to be in this network, and I'm really excited for how that is just going to influence the future of the field in ways that will be really, really neat.
Keegan, any thoughts, or should I let you off the hook?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is also just hearing Carly and Barbara, what you were just saying, the open access, the one thing I think this open access material does is it brings down the ivory tower in a way that also allows individuals at clinics or community organizations to use these materials, and they might not need a collaborator that offers a little bit more independence, and get better ideas to, for example, a new community clinic that's seeking funding, international funding, that's super competitive. Like these materials offer them access to methodologies that they can implement relatively quickly in their community to get data and apply for funding and improve community health. So there's just so many wonderfully exciting ways that I can see this open access material moving forward.
Well, thank you all again. I'm just going to repeat what I said a few seconds ago, but it really is a joy to be part of this community and just be able to engage with scholars that I've admired for a very, very long time, like Barbara and Alex, and new scholars who are pushing me to continue to refine and think through my research and what methods I use and how I use them. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to be part of the webinar today. So in closing, I want to say that the Camp International program includes a listserv, teaching program, scholarly research, website, and online methods curriculum, as we mentioned earlier, with 15 modules and 50 lectures. We hope viewers will get involved by joining the listserv, contributing lectures, and being part of the community of practice. And we are excited to work with you to enrich research methods training for anthropologists all over the world, as many scholars mentioned today. So join us and find out more info on our website, which is methodsforall, .org, or the YouTube website, which is youtube.com/methodsforall. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.